The thing about emergency management is that if you look at it like a war, we're fighting nature in a sense and trying to protect our communities from the ravages of nature. We don't send 58-year-old retired and senior citizens off to war. We send our young people off to war. Why shouldn't our young people get engaged with this whole process of protecting our communities against these natural emergencies?
Okay, I'm here with Rodger Tomlinson from Griffith University, and Rodger, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do here.
Oh, hi Mara. Look, I'm a coastal engineer by training, and I'm the director of the Griffith Centre for Coastal Management, and our job is to apply research to come up with better ways of managing our coastlines. Okay. And I've been doing this sort of work now for about 25 years.
Sensational. So, you know, the Gold Coast, very dynamic, lots of new development, lots of new infrastructure. Remind us of what has actually happened here in the past in terms of extreme weather events.
Well, the Gold Coast, interestingly, for the last 30 years hasn't had a big event, but prior to that, in periods roughly 20 to 30 years apart, we have sequences of storms, and some of these are massive. And the really big one that most people remember, if they're old enough, is one in 1967. But in fact it was a series of storms, but it was so bad that there was just massive erosion all the way along the Gold Coast, and the Army was called out.
Do you think the community actually understands the risks and the exposure to this kind of extreme weather?
Not at all. I mean, if you do a typical survey of the Gold Coast residents, most of them have only been here for 5 to 10 years. Right. They simply haven't lived through what can happen. The big thing with climate change that most people understand is sea level rise. The thing about it is that we've had sea level rise for centuries. It's now accelerating. If the water level goes up, that means more of our land-based activities get exposed. But if you add on top of that the projection of more intense and less frequent but more intense storms, we're going to have significantly more damage. A typical householder now, say living near the Broadwater, the worst case scenario at the moment might be that at high tide during a storm, the water level will go up to a level which might just be lapping at the front of their property. Under the scenarios under climate change, with sea level rising, with that storm surge added to it, and maybe a bit bigger because the storm's a bit bigger, that water might go into their property 200 or 300 times a year. Just simply because of the change in the mean level that we get sea level rise. The main reason we're concerned about extreme events on the Gold Coast is that cyclones tracking down from North Queensland, where they're generated, are the ones the storms that create the damage on the Gold Coast. And they sort of usually follow the coast down and then they veer off to the coast. The worst case scenario is if a cyclone tracks down into the top of Moreton Bay. And the nature of the bay, a shallow water environment, the water level will build up and up and up, and quite a serious surge will develop within Moreton Bay, and effectively the water will rush down through the Broadwater and in a sense back out to sea. Now this could be perhaps 4 metres of storm surge on top of high tide, perhaps, you know. That's what's really scary, because all of that low-lying land in the Broadwater would then be inundated.
What does this mean about our preparedness?
Well, we have a really good emergency management system on the Gold Coast and in southeast Queensland. I'm not sure they're prepared for that kind of catastrophe, because again, they have the same issue. They haven't lived through the really big events in the 1970s, 60s and 50s. But as a community, we need to accept that we live in a vulnerable area, and we need to prepare ourselves.
So what's your message to young people that are waking up to this as a possible future?
Well, I think the key message is to support any activities that manage what we've got at the moment. Don't fight sensible things, because sometimes, you know, short-term gains, you lose sight of the long-term benefit. We need to encourage our local authorities and our state authorities to get better planning systems in place
Yep.
so that more people aren't exposed to this. And I think young people can play a really big role in advocating for all this kind of stuff. And finally, I think it's really important that they come on board with the whole concept of what you do in an emergency.
Yeah.
Because I think there's too much young kids nowadays don't understand what to do if something goes wrong. They
Yep.
just ask someone else to help them. But there needs to be a bit more resilience built into our young people.
Terrific. Thank you so much.